I'm Harper. I've been the finance systems manager at my company for 7 years. Not once have I taken a real vacation. No summer getaways, no long weekends, not even sick leave. When payroll needs to run, it doesn't care if you've got the flu or a broken wrist. I've walked into this office through snowstorms and stomach bugs. People say I'm reliable. What they mean is, I quietly keep the machine running, while others take credit for the hum. The systems we use, I built most of them. Rewrote scripts from scratch, patched over legacy gaps, and automated reports that used to take entire teams. I've never been flashy. I don't care about credit, but I care deeply about precision. About the kind of order that keeps a company's blood pumping without anyone noticing the arteries. So, when Ben showed up on a rainy Monday morning, fresh out of college with his 2 white sneakers and confidence that hadn't yet been tested, I smiled. I even offered him coffee. He told me he was shadowing my role. Shadowing. That was the word Richard used. Said it during a hallway chat 2 days earlier, like he'd just remembered to mention it. "We're just trying to build some redundancy in the system," he said, "in case you ever want to take a break." A break? From a job I hadn't stepped away from in over 2,000 days. Redundancy. That was the part that stuck. It wasn't the kind of word people use lightly in finance, not unless they're trying to soften the blow or hide the blade. Ben had a crisp onboarding badge and a laptop already loaded with vendor access. He took the desk across from mine and leaned back like he owned the place. Within an hour, he was asking about my macro sheets, nodding too enthusiastically, typing notes with that eager energy of someone who thinks learning means mimicking. But it wasn't just curiosity. He knew things. He opened folders I hadn't shown him, asked about workflows I hadn't named. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I've trained people before. Sometimes they're sharp. Sometimes they ask the right questions. But there was a tone to Ben's questions. A confidence that didn't match someone still learning. It was like he was checking my answers against a guidebook he wasn't supposed to have. Then came the bandwidth comments. Richard started hovering near my desk, asking how I was managing my load, mentioning how great it was to finally see knowledge transfer happening. He never used to care what I was working on so long as the reports landed on time. But suddenly, he was involved, asking about approvals, tracking vendor logs, watching Ben. Ben, for his part, narrated everything like he was recording a tutorial. "Oh, cool, so this is how you reconcile the Q3 variants. Wow, love how you automated this." He was performing curiosity, but I could feel it. He wasn't trying to learn from me. He was benchmarking me, matching what he'd been told to what he saw. I kept my face neutral. I've learned over the years that nothing unsettles people more than stillness. I smiled when Ben made assumptions. Let Richard think I didn't notice his tone sharpening when I said I was keeping Ben's access limited to read only. Let them both believe I was compliant, unaware. But I noticed everything. Ben's system access was expanding faster than HR policy allowed. Richard was reviewing my logs at odd hours. How Ben started using terms I'd coined privately as if they were his own. Something shifted in me. Not panic. I've been in too many fires to be afraid of smoke. But clarity. A sense that the room had been rearranged without anyone saying it out loud. That I'd become furniture. Familiar, dependable, but no longer essential. It's a strange thing realizing you're being replaced while you're still doing the job. Watching someone study your every move, not out of respect, but calculation. And knowing the people above you are quietly nudging it forward while pretending everything's normal. That week, Ben asked to sit in on my weekly compliance calls. Richard approved it without asking me. Ben started CCing himself on threads he didn't need to be on. Then he asked if I had documentation on the payroll automation logic. Said he was curious. Said he wanted to understand it in case I ever took that long-awaited vacation. I nodded, handed him the sanitized version. Left out the edge cases, the workarounds, the real logic. Let him think he was seeing the full picture. Because I needed time. Time to watch. To learn what they were trying to do. To see how much of me they'd already tried to replace. And how much I still had that they didn't understand. By Thursday, Ben was already talking like he had a plan. Richard started dropping lines about streamlining roles and fresh perspectives. I said nothing. Just typed. Observed. Logged timestamps I didn't usually track. Saved copies I normally would have deleted. Because something was coming. I could feel it. Not in what they said, but how much they weren't saying. And if they were building a case for replacing me, I was going to build something else. Not a defense, not a plea, but something they wouldn't see coming. Something they'd never be able to undo. Ben was starting to act like he'd always belonged there. It wasn't the questions he asked. It was the ones he didn't. The ones he should have needed answers to, but somehow already knew. He moved through my folders like someone who had studied a map before arriving. He brought up systems I hadn't explained yet. Referenced back-end logic I'd kept tucked behind security layers. I'd built those systems myself. Every line, every patch. So when he casually asked about a deprecated script I hadn't used since 2019, I knew something wasn't right. Richard had started floating nearby again. Not directly interfering, but always around. Like static, you couldn't shake it. He was suddenly concerned about knowledge continuity and documentation. He started talking about transition planning in a tone too smooth to be casual. I caught him in the copy room one afternoon, flipping through one of my old compliance binders. He didn't even flinch, just smiled and asked if I had ever considered simplifying approval workflows. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a signal. Then came the invite, a lunch meeting with our CEO, Mr. Tanaka, who was visiting from the Tokyo office. The reservation was at a high-end Japanese restaurant uptown, the kind of place with minimalist decor and a tea service that came with instructions. Richard was practically glowing. He made sure we all knew he picked the place himself. Said it showed global alignment. Ben was invited too. Shadowing still. Like a puppy on a leash no one asked for. I arrived early. Old habits. I like knowing the layout. Where the exits are. Which tables give you a line of sight without being obvious? Mr. Tanaka came in 5 minutes later. Measured steps. A face like still water. He nodded once at me, polite but unreadable. His longtime assistant Misaki, the one who usually handled all U.S. coordination, was stuck in Tokyo due to flight delays. So it was just us. No buffer. No translator. Richard took that as his moment to shine. He greeted Mr. Tanaka like an old friend, the kind who once took a language class and now orders sushi like he invented it. He tried a few phrases in broken Japanese. Ordered sake with the confidence of a man who read a blog post once. Then he leaned in sweaty from nerves and ego and made a joke. Said I was a bit old-fashioned. Said I'd probably be gone by next quarter. Said it all in Japanese. It wasn't perfect. His grammar was off. The tone is clumsy. But the words were clear. And he smiled like he'd just whispered a secret to someone who wouldn't get it. But I got it. I sat there, hands folded, lips tight. Not shocked. Not angry. Just still. Because Richard didn't know I'd lived in Osaka for 6 years, that I'd earned my master's in financial systems at Todai, while navigating everything from city tax filings to ancient payroll software written in dense kanji. He didn't know I dreamed in Japanese, that my entire thesis had been reviewed by a professor who never once used English. When he finished laughing at his own joke, I reached for my tea, sipped slowly. Let the warmth spread like a switch flipping on. Something inside me shifted. Not rage, not yet. Just alignment, like a lens snapping into focus. From that moment, I stopped seeing Richard as my boss. I stopped seeing Ben as a nuisance. I started seeing the whole room differently, like I'd walked onto a chessboard where I had memorized the layout and everyone else was still learning the rules. The rest of the lunch passed in fragments. Ben tried to impress Mr. Tanaka with buzzwords. Richard handed out printouts of performance metrics I had prepared. My name was nowhere on them. I let them take the credit. Let them talk over me. Let them believe they had the advantage. But I watched. Mr. Tanaka said little. His eyes lingered on the printouts a bit longer than was polite. He nodded when expected, but not once did he engage with Richard's projections. When the check arrived, he thanked us and said he appreciated the initiative. His voice was calm, but his expression said everything. He wasn't buying it, not yet acting, but listening, observing. Richard patted me on the back as we walked out. Said he was impressed I stayed awake during all that foreign talk. I smiled, tilted my head just enough to let the light catch. Said I found it very educational. Then I bowed. Slight, formal, proper. It went right over his head. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a mug of green tea. The same kind we'd had at lunch. I replayed the moment over and over. The joke, the tone, the arrogance. I pulled up our vendor logs, access records, internal messages. Not to rage scroll, but to look with new eyes. Because now I had clarity. I didn't need to prove anything to Richard, or to Ben. I didn't need to fight for my job or make a case to stay. I needed to build something stronger, something invisible. A net they wouldn't see until it was already wrapped around their necks. I started with the emails, logged every change in file ownership, every document Ben touched that used my templates, every phrase Richard lifted from my summaries. Then I labeled them, sorted by date, by access, by anomalies. By the end of the week, I had the start of a case, and the next week, I would find the right person to send it to. Not Richard, not HR, not even the local compliance office, but someone in Tokyo. Someone who already knew how to read between the lines, and who understood that when someone jokes about replacing you in a language they think you don't understand, they're not joking at all. They're warning you. And I had every intention of listening. I didn't lash out. I didn't confront him in the hallway or demand a meeting with HR. What I did was quieter, more deliberate. I went home that night, opened my laptop, and started building a spreadsheet. Not one for payroll or vendor billing. This one was for patterns, for shadows he didn't think of left trails. The first thing I looked at was access logs. When Richard had viewed my files, when Ben had downloaded the templates, then I pulled metadata on changes made to our payroll exports. They were subtle, tucked into holiday weeks and system transitions. But there they were. Adjustments were made using override codes. Dates are misaligned by a few days. Bonus entries filed under categories reserved for emergency corrections. I knew those categories. I built them. Over the next few nights, I combed through everything. I created a folder called Quiet Work. Inside, I sorted anomalies by type bonus manipulations, unauthorized vendor payments files that had been duplicated and renamed under new authorship but contained my original audit markers. He was clever, but not smart. Smart people know how to cover their tracks. Richard thought no one was watching. He assumed no one would question the man who spoke confidently and smiled at the right moments. He didn't understand systems like I did. He didn't know that our internal audit tools timestamped everything, even internal edits. He thought metadata was just a buzzword. It took me a week to map out his greatest hits. There was a vendor called Northview Consulting, paid over $8,000 for strategic input on a project that never existed in our roadmap. I traced the listed point of contact to a disconnected number and a Gmail account created 3 months earlier. Another payment to a shell vendor registered to a co-working address that had closed 2 years ago. All approved by Richard. All signed off using internal codes I had created for actual emergencies. He was forging compliance with tools I built to protect it. And still, I said nothing. Instead, I started drafting an email, but not to HR, not to legal, to Misaki. She had been a constant in Tokyo when I first joined. Polite, exacting, and impossible to fool. The kind of woman who noticed when dates didn't align and memos came in with different language styles. She had eyes sharper than most auditors and a memory that ran deep. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but I knew she was still there, operating quietly, discreetly. I found her last known email, typed a line in Japanese. "It's been a while. I have something you may want to see." She replied 4 hours later. "Of course. I'm listening." I didn't send everything. Not yet. Just one spreadsheet. No accusations. Just a redacted trail of vendor payments code references and transaction timing. She didn't respond with shock or questions. Just one word. More, I sent another file. A backdated bonus approval with signature blocks copied from an earlier form. A comparison document showing original and altered timestamps. No commentary, just data. I labeled everything in both languages. Included footnotes where systems differed between our offices. It wasn't about opinion. It was about precision. Misaki never said thank you. Never expressed outrage. But her replies got shorter. More pointed. She started asking for original file headers. Unedited exports. When someone asks for source files instead of summaries, you know they're building a case. Meanwhile, Richard kept circling my desk. He was more relaxed now. Like the threat had passed. Like I'd accepted my phase-out. He started calling Ben my protégé. Told me to delegate more. Said things like bandwidth again, as if I were some server he could upgrade or shut down. I smiled. Said sure. Let Ben make small changes. Showed him the surface-level processes. Gave him access that routed everything he touched into a mirror folder I controlled. Every mistake he made was logged. Every edit was recorded with full version history. I even started testing them. Left small traps. Misnamed columns in my walkthroughs. Inserted comments in shared files that were later used by Richard verbatim in his updates to Tokyo. He was plagiarizing and sabotaging, and I let him. At night, I kept building my archive. I tagged files by risk level, color-coded timelines, added notes in 2 languages. The folder grew into a system of its own. A map of every infraction, every arrogance, every move they thought went unseen. And still, I said nothing. I didn't need an audience. I needed results. Misaki's requests became more technical. She asked about internal approval code changes from the past quarter. She asked if I had full copies of the employee access logs, especially during off hours. She asked if I could export them cleanly with metadata intact. I did. The moment I knew the end was near came quietly. No fireworks, no confrontation. Just one email. Sent at 4:42 a.m., my time. From a Tokyo address. No subject line. Just a secure file drop with the words, "Understood. We will proceed." I didn't exhale. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there watching the screen glow. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth, when properly packaged, doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be undeniable. It started with a calendar invite I didn't request. The subject line was sterile Project Zenith transition. The owner listed was Ben, not me. No explanation, no handoff. Just a quiet transfer of everything I'd built over the past 3 years. Every audit-hardened formula, every control logic, every back-end reconciliation I coded on weekends while Richard sent midnight messages asking for status updates. Ben couldn't tell the difference between net and gross revenue, but there he was now listed as lead on a system that had taken hundreds of hours and years of institutional memory to shape. I sat at my desk staring at the invite. 1 second, then another. Not angry, not confused, just still. Richard walked past a few minutes later, coffee in hand, smiling like someone who just placed a winning bet. He said he figured I could use the bandwidth and Ben had been asking for more responsibility. I said nothing, just nodded. Smiled like the gears in my head hadn't already shifted into lock. 2 hours later, a company-wide email hit inboxes. A quarterly update sent directly to Tokyo's board. Subject payroll optimization. Initial wins. It was 3 paragraphs of corporate fluff. Efficiency gains. Legacy process modernization. Embedded in the middle was a bullet point, Project Zenith successfully transitioned. Early metrics indicate improvement under new leadership. Attached was a PDF, a compliance confirmation. At first glance, it looked perfect. The formatting was clean, language precise, timestamps aligned. But something tugged at me, a flicker behind my eyes, the signature at the bottom. It was mine, or it used to be. It had been copied from an earlier version of a sign-off I had filed 6 months prior. The approval code was reused. The document's creation date was backdated using a patch script I had written for version testing but never released outside the sandbox. Richard hadn't just stolen credit, he'd forged my signature. I downloaded the file, saved it in a folder labeled plainly Final Strike. Then I opened a blank email to Misaki. Attached the file. The subject line was blank. The body of the message contained only one sentence. This document's shell is correct, but the contents are not mine. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. The next few days were a study in quiet preparation. I organized screenshots, named folders after dates and events, cross-referenced documents that had been subtly altered, made sure every trail led cleanly back to Richard's access ID. I labeled a folder, sanitized versions, and started feeding Ben copies of files with removed formulas, simplified logs, and missing context. He never noticed. He kept nodding, pretending to understand, asking to see my old workbooks like he was doing archival research. Richard didn't speak to me much. He was busy playing visionary, sending out updates to upper management, giving interviews to the internal newsletter, talking about how proud he was of our agile transition. He called Ben a rising star, called me dependable, the kind of compliments people give furniture. I kept my responses short, professional. I didn't flinch when he walked by or when Ben took my seat in the weekly check-in. I simply moved to the side, opened my laptop, and kept working. But this time, every file I touched had a mirror. Every document Ben modified was routed to an encrypted cloud folder with a backup timestamp. Every word Richard used that had come from me was cataloged with source history. They thought I was retreating, but I was preparing the floor beneath them to fall out with one silent move. I stopped drinking caffeinated coffee that week, switched to mint tea. My hands were steadier, my thoughts are clearer. The adrenaline had worn off, and what was left wasn't fear. It was focused. Richard's arrogance was accelerating. He didn't know that the closer he got to the spotlight, the more exposed he became. He thought Tokyo was impressed, that no one was checking the metadata, that people like me don't fight back, that we don't know how. What he didn't understand was that my silence wasn't surrender, it was calibration. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to argue or explain. I'd simply hand over the record. Because the thing about systems is, once you understand their rules, you don't break them. You make them break themselves. The meeting invite came late Friday. Subject line, Q4, efficiency strategy. Attendance mandatory. The kind of vague corporate language that sounds harmless, but means someone's about to be cut loose. It was scheduled for Monday morning. No details, just time, location, and the quiet implication that change was coming. I arrived early, not for appearances, for positioning. I chose the seat dead center in the front row. Direct line of sight. No distractions. I wanted him to see me. Richard was already there, pacing near the screen like a TED Talk was about to happen. He wore his best suit. His tie was a little too bright. The kind of color people choose when they want to look confident but end up looking desperate. Ben stood off to the side, clutching a folder he didn't understand. His eyes kept darting to me. I didn't blink. The room filled slowly. Executives, directors, board reps from 3 departments. A few people from legal sat near the back, not taking notes, just watching. That was the first clue. Richard opened with a smile. He clicked through the first 2 slides. Efficiency targets. Staffing optimization. The usual noise. Then came the chart about system transitions. His voice rose half a note. He spoke of progress, of reimagined roles. He said my name once briefly, then pivoted immediately to Ben's new leadership. On the 3rd slide, he paused. Before we move forward, he said, I want to address a minor issue that came to our attention this morning. Some documents surfaced that appear to reference outdated procedures. We're currently reviewing them. Nothing alarming. The CEO raised a hand. Slowly, deliberately. That will not be necessary, he said. We've already reviewed them. Richard's mouth closed around whatever spin he had prepared. Across the table, one of the senior board members slid a printed packet forward. He didn't speak, just stared at Richard like he was waiting for the room to catch up. Richard reached for it. His fingers hesitated. Then he flipped the first page. Then the second. His face didn't move, but the air shifted. Like something invisible had tightened around his chest. Can you explain these transactions? The CEO asked. His voice was flat. Not aggressive, just surgical. Richard cleared his throat. Said they were end-of-quarter adjustments. Said he had documentation. Said it was a misunderstanding. He kept saying words, but they weren't answers. Just noise. Then the door opened. Misaki walked in. Her steps were soft, but the room stilled. No one moved. No one needed to be told who she was. She wore navy. Her expression was unreadable. In her hands was a single dark folder. She didn't look at Richard. She didn't look at me. She walked straight to the CEO, handed him the folder, and stepped back. The CEO opened it, read silently, passed it left. One by one, each board member read. Each face hardened by a degree. Misaki stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This manager, she said, has submitted falsified compliance documents, rerouted unauthorized payments, and misrepresented audit trails. Evidence is included. No one asked her to elaborate. Richard sat frozen. His hands were empty. His defense was gone. He tried one more time. Said he was being targeted. Said someone had been sabotaging his leadership. That this was a personal vendetta. The room didn't react. I stood. No rush, no drama. I let the room settle on me. Then I bowed. Just slightly. And in Japanese I said, when you joked about firing me, you forgot something. I know your language better than you know your job. Silence. A breath. Then another. Someone near the back whispered. Someone else muttered, damn. Richard didn't move. He just stared. The CEO nodded once, then looked past him. Security didn't enter. Instead, 2 internal operations managers quietly stepped forward. One motioned toward the door. Richard stood slowly, picked up his laptop like it was heavier than he remembered, walked out with no one speaking. Once the door closed, the CEO turned back to the room. Let's move forward. He opened a new slide. Organizational updates. At the bottom of the page, my name appeared. New title. Director of Financial Systems, reporting directly to Tokyo. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just exhaled. Because justice, when done right, doesn't need applause. It just needs silence. The room settled like it had exhaled something heavy. A name had been erased and a new one written in its place. Mine. No confetti, No speech. Just a title on a screen and a nod from the man who now trusted me more than the one he'd once believed. Director of Financial Systems, reporting directly to Tokyo. I didn't look around to see who noticed. I didn't scan for reactions or measure approval. I simply folded my notebook, slid my pen into its loop, and stood. The chair made a soft sound as I stepped away. Enough to be heard, not enough to be remembered. No one stopped me. No one needed to. As I walked out, I passed the chair Richard had left behind, still slightly turned from where he'd stood, empty. And next to it, the folder Misaki had laid down like a final seal. I didn't touch it, didn't glance again. I didn't need to. The hallway outside the boardroom was quiet, just the low hum of overhead lights and the distant rhythm of keys tapping behind closed doors. I moved through it calmly. No rush, no tension in my shoulders. My breath was steady. My badge still worked when I tapped out. Outside, the air had shifted. Rain earlier that morning had cleared, leaving the sidewalks damp and reflective. The sky was pale and undecided. I walked without a destination. I just need to move. I thought about the past year, about every moment I bit my tongue, every email I archived, every edit I made to a document I knew would be claimed by someone else. None of it had been weakness. Not once. It had been a choice, strategy, control. Because power isn't always loud. It doesn't always walk in and demand the room. Sometimes it waits. It watches. It holds its breath until the exact second it's needed. And then it shifts everything. No one knew I had signed my new contract 2 weeks before that meeting. Misaki had sent it without fanfare. One line confirming my role. One attachment. No emojis. No promises. Just trust. The kind that's earned in quiet clarity. I didn't tell anyone, not even the people I liked. I wanted the movie to speak for itself, and it had. I passed a storefront on my walk, caught my reflection in the glass. Nothing dramatic, just a woman standing straight eyes steady, walking forward without the need to look back. That's the thing about silence. When it's chosen, not forced, it's not the absence of voice. It's presence, full and sharp. I crossed the street at the next light. The city moved around me unaware, just like always. But I was no longer part of the noise. I was something else now. Not louder, just undeniable.